It's fourth quarter. Soldier Field. The wind is coming off Lake Michigan at 20 miles an hour, and it doesn't care about your game plan. A quarterback steps under center, looks across the line of scrimmage, counts the pass rushers. There are too many. There are always too many. Most NFL defenses in 1985 wanted to beat you. The Chicago Bears wanted to make you quit before halftime. In front of your own fans, in front of your own teammates. They weren't playing football. They were conducting a public execution, and the whole country had a ticket. Opposing quarterbacks posted a passer rating of 52.9 against this unit. The league average was 91. That's not a gap. That's a cliff edge. And every quarterback in the NFC was being pushed toward it every single Sunday. You didn't just lose to these Bears. You walked off that field a different person, quieter, smaller, like something had been taken from you that you weren't getting back. So let me ask you something. How does a franchise that couldn't fill its own stadium in 1983, a franchise that its own city had quietly given up on, how does that team become the most terrifying thing the NFL had ever seen in under 2 years? That's exactly what we're getting into. Let's talk about what this franchise actually was before any of this happened. The Chicago Bears, George Halas's team, the franchise that helped build the NFL from nothing. 60 years of history. Sight championship banners on the walls from another era, a name that used to make people in this league sit up straight. By 1981, none of that meant anything. 6 wins, 10 losses, dead last in their own division. Coach Neil Armstrong fired the second the season ended. 2 winning seasons in 19 years. Not 2 bad years, not a rough patch. 19 years of irrelevance in a city that had stopped expecting anything different, and that's the part that cut deepest. Not the losing, the indifference. Chicago fans weren't angry anymore. Angry means you still care. They had gone quiet, empty seats, lowered expectations, a slow, suffocating acceptance that this was just what the Bears were now. A franchise with George Halas's name on its walls had become invisible to its own city. Then Halas did something nobody saw coming. On January 20th, 1982, 86 years old, watching his life's work drift toward irrelevance, Papa Bear called a press conference and introduced a head coach with 0 head coaching experience, not a candidate for any other opening that season. Not the safe choice, not the logical choice, Mike Ditka, built in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, steel town, working class, the kind of place that produces men who don't know how to back down because nobody ever showed them how. It's a tight end who once publicly said George Halas threw nickels around like manhole covers and got traded for it. A man who wrote a letter to that same Halas years later from Dallas saying simply, "I want to come back. I am a Bear." Halas took him back. At that press conference, Ditka stood at the podium and said, "I believe that everyone has a destiny in life, and mine is with the Chicago Bears." The room wasn't sure whether to believe him. Here's what you need to understand about Ditka. This was a man who would grab a player by the face mask on the sideline and tell him exactly what he thought of his effort, loudly, in front of everybody, and then put his arm around that same player after the final whistle and mean every word of that too. He treated kindness like a tactical error. He would have died for any one of his players. That contradiction wasn't a character flaw, it was the entire foundation. Halas was gone within 2 years. He died on October 31st, 1983. He never saw what was coming, but before he left, he'd already made his last and most important decision. And there was a second decision, one that didn't make headlines the same way, one that most people don't talk about nearly enough, because Ditka alone doesn't build what's coming next. What's coming next required something else entirely. George Halas brought in a defensive coordinator named Buddy Ryan in 1978. Nobody paid much attention at the time. They would. Ryan inherited a Bears defense that was, statistically, among the worst in the league at stopping the run and generating any kind of pressure on the quarterback. So he went to a chalkboard, and he started drawing something that the NFL had never seen. He called it the 46, named after safety Doug Plank. Jersey number 46, who Ryan pulled down from the free safety position and placed directly into the heart of the formation. 6 defenders stacked on the line of scrimmage. I say 8 men in the box on nearly every snap. Pass rushers lined up in positions that offensive linemen had no assignment to cover because their assignments assumed a normal defensive formation. The 46 was not a normal defensive formation. Most defenses in 1985 operated on a simple principle. Read what the offense gives you and react. Wait for a mistake. Exploit it. Ryan looked at that philosophy and discarded it completely. The 46 didn't wait for your mistake. It engineered your mistake. Yes, before the snap, before you called the play, it put so many bodies at the line of scrimmage that your offensive line faced an impossible equation every single down. Block everyone on the line, and a free rusher came from somewhere else. Account for the free rusher, and a gap opened directly in front of your quarterback. There was no answer that closed every hole. Buddy Ryan designed a defense with no correct solution. His former Washington quarterback Joe Theismann, who in 1985 was sacked 4 times and threw 2 interceptions in a 45-10 loss to Chicago, said the 46 didn't confuse him. It coerced him. That one word tells you everything. He wasn't lost. His choices were simply being removed, one by one, before he could make them. Now the man himself. Ryan never called his players by their names. You were a number or you were an adjective, and the adjective was never flattering. He could take a 280-pound defensive lineman apart in a film session and have him back on the field angrier and more dangerous than he'd ever been. Tore them down and rebuilt them into weapons. That was the process. That was the method. His players were so loyal that in 1981, when Halas was preparing to fire the entire coaching staff, the defensive players wrote a letter, a physical letter, to the owner of the franchise, begging him to keep their defensive coordinator. NFL players are writing letters for an assistant coach. Ryan was so certain he was right about everything that he made everyone around him feel slightly insane, and then went out and proved them right to feel that way. His arrogance wasn't a personality problem. It was structural. The whole defense was built on the certainty that if you committed to this system completely, no offense in professional football could solve it. He was right. And then there was the other man on that sideline. Sir Ditka and Ryan occupied the same building, the same staff, the same Super Bowl run, and genuinely could not stand each other. They feuded openly, argued in front of players. There were moments during games where teammates had to physically step between them. During the Miami loss in 1985, Ditka reportedly challenged Ryan to a fight in the hallway at halftime. The offense was Ditka's, the defense was Ryan's. Neither answered to the other. The tension worked, not despite what they were, because of it. In 1985, the Bears led the NFL in points allowed, yards allowed, and takeaways, all 3 at the same time, a feat that wouldn't be matched until the 2013 Seattle Seahawks. They allowed 12.4 points per game. The league average that season was 21.5. The next closest defense allowed 16.5. That gap, 12.4 to 16.5, is the distance between a great defense and whatever the 85 Bears were. There isn't a word for it that doesn't sound like an exaggeration. But a system is just a system. It needs soldiers. And what Buddy Ryan had on that roster wasn't soldiers. It was something closer to a natural disaster. You want to understand what 15-1 actually looked like? Don't think about wins and losses. Think about what happened to people. Week 2, New England Patriots, the team Chicago would later face in the Super Bowl. Mike Singletary had 2 sacks and an interception by himself in one game against the team's starting quarterback. So the Bears won 20-7, and it wasn't that close. Week 4, Washington Redskins. Willie Gault took the opening kickoff 99 yards to the house, and the Bears won 45-10. The Redskins finished that year 10-6. Week 5, San Francisco 49ers, the team that had humiliated the Bears in the NFC Championship the season before. Chicago sacked Joe Montana 7 times. 7. Walter Payton ran for 120 yards. The Bears left San Francisco with a road win that sent a message to every team in the NFC. Last year is over. They kept winning every week. Different opponent, same outcome. Week 6. Tampa Bay, the team that had given them trouble all year, dispatched. Green Bay twice, Minnesota, Dallas Cowboys, 44-0, their worst defeat in franchise history. Both starting quarterbacks got knocked unconscious. The Bears generated 6 sacks, Schiles 5 takeaways, and 2 defensive touchdowns in a nationally televised game with John Madden and Pat Summerall on the call. After the game, Dan Hampton was asked about the Cowboys' pregame trash talk. A cornerback named Everson Walls had dismissed the Bears' unbeaten record, said they hadn't played anybody. Hampton looked at the reporter and said, "We still haven't played anybody," 44-0, and he said that. Now stop. Because you need to understand something about number 50 before this goes any further. Mike Singletary broke 16 helmets at Baylor University. Not wore out, broke. Shattered them with his own skull, making contact with other human beings. His teammates would have spares lined up on the bench because he'd crack one mid-game and not even know it happened until someone in the huddle told him. That's who was playing middle linebacker for the 1985 Chicago Bears. Before games, Singletary didn't just watch film, he consumed it. His Baylor coach saw him for 10 plays on a reel and shut the projector off, said the intensity leaping off the screen was enough. On the field, his eyes went wide and still before the snap. Not with panic, not with aggression, with absolute certainty. He already knew. A reserve linebacker on that Bears team said Singletary was calling out the other team's plays before they happened, out loud, before the snap, correctly. Every single time. And then there was Walter Payton, 1,551 rushing yards that season, led the entire team in receptions, the NFL's all-time leading rusher, first-team All-Pro, the greatest running back alive in 1985. And on most Sundays, the defense still led the highlight reel. That detail is small. Keep it anyway. It matters later. Back to Dallas, November 17th, 11-0, the whole country watching. After the 44-0 final, as after the locker room had erupted and the magnitude of what just happened had settled, Singletary stood in front of reporters and said, "We're still getting better. We want to reach our peak at the right time." 11 wins, 2 shutouts, national television, Cowboys' worst home loss ever. And Singletary said they hadn't peaked. For one afternoon in Texas in November 1985, standing inside a stadium where they had just made professional football look easy, it genuinely felt like this team had no ceiling. Like this wasn't just a great season, it was the beginning of something permanent. Hold on to that feeling. If this is the kind of story you came here for, the ones that actually deserve to be told, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe, you know what it means. Now, about that one game, 15 wins, 1 loss. And that one loss told you everything about what was coming. December 2nd, 1985, Miami's Orange Bowl, Monday Night Football. On 12-0 Bears, 8-4 Dolphins. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. On the field, it looked like something else entirely. Dan Marino had studied what happened when teams tried to sit back and wait against the 46 defense. They got destroyed. So he did the opposite. He spread the formation, pulled his tight end out, put Nat Moore, a 34-year-old receiver who had nearly retired the previous year, in the slot directly against linebacker Wilber Marshall. Then he got rid of the ball before the Bears' pass rush could arrive. Quick, precise, gone. Moore caught 4 passes for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. Marshall, one of the most terrifying athletes on that defense, was built to destroy running backs and blitz quarterbacks, not shadow slot receivers on crossing routes in Miami Heat. It was like bringing a sledgehammer to do a surgeon's job. By halftime, the score was 31-10. The defense that had held its previous 3 opponents to a combined total of 3 points had just given up 31 in 2 quarters. In the cramped visitors' locker room at the Orange Bowl, in the shower area, specifically because that's where it happened, Ditka and Ryan had to be physically separated. Ditka wanted Marshall pulled off more, put a defensive back on him, fix the mismatch. Ryan refused. His defense, his calls, 2 men, same 21-point deficit, reading it completely differently. Ditka saw a personnel problem with a straightforward solution. Ryan saw a once-in-a-season aberration, one specific quarterback with one specific release that no one else in professional football could replicate. Fix the personnel, and you've changed the entire identity of what made the defense great. The final score was 38-24. Hours later, as Dan Marino would recount decades afterward when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, someone asked him what his greatest accomplishment was. He didn't say the records, he didn't say the yardage totals, he said beating the Bears on Monday night. Back in Chicago, while the city was still processing the loss, nearly half the team gathered at midnight and filmed the Super Bowl shuffle video, which is either the most confident thing a professional sports team has ever done, or proof that the 1985 Bears simply operated on a different frequency than the rest of the human race. The rest of the NFC spent that week watching tape. They saw the crack. What none of them understood yet, what they were about to learn the hard way, is that a wounded bear is considerably more dangerous than a comfortable one. January 26th, 1986, Louisiana Superdome, New Orleans. On the second play of the game, Walter Payton fumbled. The Patriots recovered. Tony Franklin kicked a 36-yard field goal. New England led 3-0. The Bears had given up the first score of the Super Bowl. For approximately 4 minutes, the football world held its breath. Then the 46 defense introduced itself to Tony Eason. 6 possessions, 0 completions, 3 sacks, 3 punts, 2 fumbles, 1 interception. Eason finished his Super Bowl career, his entire Super Bowl career, 0 for 6 with 3 sacks before Grogan replaced him late in the first half. "I tried to scramble," Eason said afterward, "but there was no place to go." There's no kinder way to describe what happened to him. By halftime, Bears 23, Patriots 3. New England had gained negative 19 total yards. Negative 19. The third quarter was not a football game. It was a verdict being read aloud. McMahon opened the half with a 60-yard bomb to Galt, then drove 96 yards, a Super Bowl record, and punched it in himself. Reggie Phillips intercepted Grogan and returned it 28 yards for a score. Then a Patriots fumble gave the Bears the ball at the 1-yard line. Ditka turned to his sideline and sent in William Perry. That's 335 pounds of defensive tackle, trotting onto the field as a running back, while 127 million Americans watched from their living rooms. Perry took the handoff and fell forward 1 yard into the end zone, then spiked the ball hard enough to leave a dent. The crowd responded as if witnessing a natural phenomenon. The final score was 46-10. 7 sacks, 6 turnovers, 36-point margin, the largest in Super Bowl history at the time. The MVP was a defensive end. New England gained 7 rushing yards for the entire game. 7. That's not a typo. The Bears had just won 17 of 18 games, shut out both playoff opponents before the Super Bowl, posted the most dominant defensive performance in championship game history. They were supposed to do it again next year, and the year after that. They never played another playoff game together. Remember that feeling after Dallas, 11 wins in. Singletary telling reporters the team still hadn't peaked. So if the ceiling's so high you couldn't find it, hold on to that feeling. Here's what happened to it. After Super Bowl 20, the Chicago Bears front office looked at Buddy Ryan, the man who built the most dominant defense professional football had ever seen, and decided not to offer him a head coaching position within the organization. Ryan left for Philadelphia. He took nothing with him, except everything he knew. The defense aged. The organization didn't rebuild around it. By 1987, their 4 key starters were either gone, hurt, or a diminished version of what they'd been. The window that felt permanent in November 1985 closed inside of 2 years, and Walter Payton, 22 carries in Super Bowl 20, 61 yards, 0 touchdowns. The greatest running back alive on the biggest stage of his life never crossed the goal line. McMahon scored, the fridge scored. Walter Payton, sweetness, watched from the sideline when they handed it to a 335-pound defensive tackle instead. Ditka said afterward he'd regret it for the rest of his life. Here was a man who would have died for any one of his players, and in the one moment where dying for them wasn't enough, where it required something smaller and more precise, a single play call with the ball at the 1-yard line, he couldn't find it. What if Ryan stays? What if the front office treats 1986 like 1985? What if Payton gets the ball? You already know this feeling. It's not a question. It's a door that never opened. The dynasty that should have been 3, 4, 5 championships, it was 1. Just 1. Right now, somewhere in the NFL, a defensive coordinator is drawing up a blitz. He's stacking bodies near the line. He's manufacturing pressure from angles the quarterback hasn't accounted for. He's building a problem with no clean solution, overloading one gap to open another, forcing a decision faster than a human being can comfortably make one. He doesn't know he learned this from Buddy Ryan. He learned it from someone who learned it from someone who watched what happened in 1985 and understood for the first time that the central objective of a defense is not to stop the run. It is to destroy the quarterback's ability to think. That idea did not exist in professional football before Chicago. It is the invisible architecture of every pressure defense in the league today. 3rd and long, 2-minute drill, playoffs. And every time a quarterback takes a 3-step drop and feels the pocket collapse before he expects it, that's 1985. That's still 1985. They won 1 championship. They should have won 3. The window opened wide and closed fast, and Walter Payton never got the ball at the 1, and Buddy Ryan went to Philadelphia, and the dynasty that should have written 5 more chapters stopped at 1. But the defense never left. The NFL had 32 chances to figure out what was coming. They got 1 year. If you made it here, you already know why this channel exists. These are the stories that deserve more than a highlight reel. The dynasties that should have been, the players who never got what they earned, the teams that changed the game without getting credit for changing it. There are more where this came from. Subscribe, hit the bell, and if this one meant something, share it with someone who remembers.